Hey everyone. So if the last video still left you with some questions or concerns, I'm doing this one just to kind of recover the material and try to explain it in a different way, but it's all going to be the same information. So when we're talking about measuring distances, measuring dimensions, figuring out what size our pieces are, and measuring out how big or how long or how wide they need to be in order for us to cut them down into the correct sizes and shapes. When we're using feet and inches, we are using what's called the imperial units of measure. So think of the base unit, so being the most simplest form of this unit of measure. So the base unit is the foot. Okay, so 1 foot. This is the base unit of measure. Sometimes you'll see it written as FT, so capital F and T. Sometimes you'll see it written lowercase f and T and a period. So you can see any one of these different variations on a blueprint, maybe written down in some special instructions. There's another way to write it on a blueprint, but I'll get to that here in a second because I don't want to throw too much at you all at once. And when we're talking about 1 foot, if we were to take a standard size ruler, so we've got 1 inch on this side and it goes all the way up to 12 inches. This is your standard ruler. So this is 1 foot. So you can see the 1 going all the way to 12. And then you can see on the bottom side, if we flip this over, it goes into meters and centimeters. You focus up. There you go. Meters and centimeters. But we're not going to worry about the metric unit of measure yet. We're just going to be concentrating on feet and inches. So if we take the base unit of 1 foot, this can be broken down into 12 inches. Now the inches can also be written IN period. Sometimes you'll just see it written out as inch. But no matter how it's written out, 1 foot is always equal to 12 inches. Now, we can go even further by breaking down the inch into several fractions. So just the same as 12 inches comprises 1 foot, if we look very closely at the ruler, we can see that 1 inch is broken down into even smaller increments of measurement. So for the sake of this example, let's go ahead and say that our inch begins about here and our inch ends about here. And the distance between these two lines is, like I said, 1 inch. So now let's break this down into fractions of an inch. So if we have the 1 inch mark over here, oh, this pen doesn't work. So now if we have a 1 inch mark right here and we've got 0 over there, so that's our start, we can go ahead and break this down into just halves. So we find the halfway point. It's always given to us on a ruler, but we're going to say that the halfway point is about right here. Okay, so this is going to be the halfway point, or what we would call 1/2 of an inch, or 1/2 inch, half an inch. It's all the same. 0.5 inches, because 0.5 is half of 1. That is going to be the halfway mark, and it's half an inch. Now the first thing I want to point out here, and I kind of corrected my drawing really fast to make up for it, is that the beginning of the inch and the end of an inch, those two tick marks are going to be the longest tick marks in the span of an inch. So if we were to look at this ruler really quick, you can kind of see, if we just look at the 1 and the 2, the longest tick marks are at the inch marks. And we can kind of go down in the smaller fractions of an inch, and you can see at the halfway point, the half-inch mark, it's not as long as the inch markers at 1 and 2, but it's still longer than the rest of the tick marks. So we can use the size of the tick marks to help us identify what fraction of an inch we're dealing with. So always remember that out of the series of tick marks between the inch markers, the half-inch mark is always going to be the longest of everything in between. Now we can go ahead and we can start breaking down the inch even smaller. So we have the half inch. What do you think is going to be the halfway point right here? So first let's eyeball it and say half is right there. Oops, it's not too straight. Right there. And then let's find our halfway point over here. This looks about right. All right, so we found our halfway points. So we've got half an inch. So if we break it down even further into 4 separate parts of an inch, these are called quarters of an inch, or you can say fourths of an inch. So we have from our starting point over, we have 1/4. And then moving on over to the halfway point, we can say this is 2/4 or 2/4 of an inch, but that simplifies down to 1/2 of an inch. Now moving over one more quarter, this is 3/4 of an inch. And just the same, where if we take the halfway points of the inch, these lines are going to be shorter than all the other bigger increments that came before it. And we can break this down even further. So in between the 0 and the 1/4, this is about our halfway point. Same thing over here, right here, and right there. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 8 parts of an inch. But instead of saying 8 parts of an inch, we say that we have eighths of an inch. So this would be our 1/8 mark. Over here we have 2/8, but that is simplified down into 1/4. We have 3/8. We could say 4/8 of an inch, but that simplifies down into 1/4. We have 5/8. We have 6/8, which is simplified to 3/4. And then we have 7/8 of an inch. And then we would have 8/8 of an inch, but if we were to write 8/8, this is basically the same thing as writing 1. So that's where the simplification comes in. And just like with all the other units of measure, or sorry, with all the other increments, these lines, again, are going to be just a little bit shorter than all the other increments that came before it. All right, and the last the last increment of an inch that I'm going to show you is the 16th. So it follows the pattern of all the other increments where we're looking at the halfway points. And so we're going to start over here where this is going to be 1/16. All right, 1/16 right here. We're going to have 2/16, but that simplifies down to 1/8. We're going to have 3/16, which is right there. We could say 4/16, but that's actually 1/4. Then we have 5/16, which is right there. We could say 6/16, but that simplifies down to 3/8. And we'll have 7/16 right there. Now 8/16 would be 1/2, and so on and so forth, all the way until 16/16, which is again the same thing as writing 1. Now, as a welder, I think I specified in the previous video that the smallest increment of an inch that you would go down to is 1/16 of an inch. There are going to be times where you deal with 30 seconds of an inch. Now that's half of a 16th. But it's going to be a little hard to draw on this image up here that I've drawn out for you. But just follow the pattern with all of these increments from 1/2 inch to 1/4 to 1/8 to a 16th and then to a 32nd of an inch. This is pretty much the basic way to look at fractions of an inch, and these are all the common fractions that you'll come across when reading blueprints, when building projects, when cutting out materials, and preparing your materials to weld.